All right, and we should be live. If someone doesn't mind, once someone's in the chat, if they don't mind just dropping us a comment so we can say hello. Otherwise, our plan here is to talk for an hour about our favorite thing, horror. Good. It looks like we got some people in the chat. If someone can just drop a hello so they can let us know that the audio and visuals work and all that good stuff. But yeah, we're going to basically introduce ourselves, talk horror, lots of recommendations, and hopefully you're here for that. So yeah, if someone's able to drop a comment, that would be most appreciated because I always get paranoid that these things aren't going to work. But otherwise, might as well go get started. I'll repost this here. So if anyone's not able to catch, oh, good. Now we got some comments.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you.
That's
So
my
if anyone's
brother.
not able, yay! I was gonna say, Laura. Oh, great. Now they're flooding in. So thank you, everyone. I see lots of people I recognize. So I appreciate chatting with us. So maybe if you want to go around, and I thought we'd kind of start for anyone who doesn't know one of us, kind of say, who we are, our channel, and then kind of do I would say like our booktube origins. So basically, how did we get into horror into booktube? I don't know if one of you wants to go first, or I can.
Sure, I can
Yeah,
go.
awesome.
So, hello everyone. My name is Katie over from ChapterStackss. I have the YouTube channel I've had for maybe 9 years. And then I also, 2 years ago, I started a Discord group called the Year of Horror Book Club. So, feel free to join that if you just want to chat about horror all year round. But I got into horror because my parents are super into it, and I think they're watching. We were talking about that before. But they would always be watching horror movies, and I would sneak down the steps so slowly from my bedroom and then sit behind the couch and crawl behind and watch without them realizing it. And then I would pop out at the end. So watching like very extreme R-rated horror movies when I was little, and eventually they just let me come sit on the couch and watch with them. Um, so that's how I got into horror and then books from that. Um, but in terms of booktube, if anybody remembers the readables, did either of
Yes.
you watch
Yes,
her? Yeah.
Priscilla.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah. So I think she was the first channel I came across, and I was searching a
Mhm.
book review, and I was reading it's probably like Anna and the French Kiss. I feel like
Yep.
that's such a
Booktube
classic
classic.
year one booktube
Booktube
book.
classic. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think she popped up, and I don't even remember, it's been so long, if I was reading horror when I started, but eventually I started thinking there really aren't that many people reading thrillers or horror novels and posting about it on YouTube. Now there's so many, but at the time it was all
Yeah.
YA contemporary. And so I kind of made a little niche for myself. And now there are tons of us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. If you want to go next, Cameron.
All right. My name is Cameron Chaney. I'm the host of Library Macabre on YouTube, Booktube channel. I talk pretty much exclusively about horror now. But when I started out 10 years ago in July, I kind of talked about just whatever. It was kind of a catch-all channel. I did talk a little bit about YA. I kind of started getting more into YA when I started BookTube because that's what everybody was talking
Yeah.
about. I quickly found out that it's not really for me. Some of it is. I still will read like modern YA horror books, but mostly I just like the vintage stuff. I was always into Fear Street and Goosebumps and things like that. So that's kind of what's always stuck with me. Um, I think it was about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, when I reviewed Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix. And that's when I really started leaning heavy into horror because that's always what I loved. And that video did so well that I realized like I could do horror exclusively on this channel. I think I'll do pretty well. And that's when I came up with Library Macabre. And since then it's just like I just do horror. That's kind of the niche that I've created for myself. And it's been really cool to see more and more horror booktubers come in, and we've kind of created our own little community, which is cool because booktube as a whole has gotten to be so big. Like I remember when I first started out, booktube really wasn't a thing. It was just like people who talk about books. The term booktube hadn't even been coined yet, so
Yeah.
it was very, very small, just people with webcams just chatting. And since then it's grown into this huge thing that I can't keep up with. So now that we have our own like little niche of horror, that's been really cool. Everything feels very like close knit, which is nice.
Oh, fully agree. And I think a lot of people probably watching this are familiar with my channel since it's being streamed here. But just in case someone doesn't, I'm Rachel with the Shades of Orange. And I'm kind of, I guess, a bit of a weird entry with horror because I'm probably of the three of us the only person who did not read or watch it growing up. I was a giant scaredy cat. I watched one episode of Goosebumps. It was the first episode with Slappy. I was terrified. My sister had just moved out and gotten her own room. It was like this big deal. And I made my big sister move back into my room for a month because I was terrified he was going to come through the vents in my house. So I didn't like read it at all, but what I loved was thrillers and mysteries. And I would read one, and I was like, "This is good," but I wish it was darker. I wish it was creepier, and I kept like wanting more and more. The way I actually got into BookTube specifically, and without, I don't want to sound like too much of a fangirl, was I looked up a review of Gone Girl after reading it, loving it, and having no one to talk about it. Unsurprisingly, I found Katie's channel because you had done a review, which I imagine is probably kind of blown up over the years of because I think you did it right when it first came out before, again, she became
She
a
needs to write
sensation.
another book. It's been, and
She
Yes.
it's
does.
never gonna happen. I've fully
Oh,
given up hope that
I
she'll
don't think
ever
she
write
will
something else.
anymore. I think she's just
No.
writing out like how do you follow up those three books?
Yeah.
So I've given up, but yeah, so I found BookTube there. But then I was just kind of reading a bit of everything, contemporary thrillers, some fantasy, whatnot. And I only got into horror when Stephanie from well, at the time she was That's What She Read. Now wanted, of course, is the host of Books in the Freezer, and she was like, "Hey, I want to start up this horror podcast." And she was kind of chatting with me, and eventually she was looking for a co-host, and she's like, "You're the only person I know who reads a bunch of like dark, messed up books. How would you feel about doing this?" And I quite frankly said, "I don't actually read any horror, but I'll give it a try." Turns out I love the genre, and it's worked out really well. I've stepped down from being a co-host, but definitely my channel I think really grew, and I got known for reading the stabby books for that reason. Yeah, so like I said, I was kind of, I guess I'm a late bloomer to horror.
Yeah, I think
And
the
I just
first.
realized, I'm sorry, Katie.
Oh no, you can go.
I just realized I didn't really talk about how I got into horror. As a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch horror films.
Mm,
My mom was very much like, "Oh, it'll open a door, and you don't want
yeah.
to go there." So I would, she'd let me read Goosebumps, and I could watch Are You Afraid of the Dark on TV, and I was like, "Yeah, this is it. Like, this is
Or in
what
the
I
sand.
love."
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, "This is I want Halloween." I was obsessed with
Mhm.
Halloween, and slowly, like as I got into my teens, I started sneaking horror films into the house. Like the
There's a
only
theme with
rebellious thing.
sneaking and watching all this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would like go to FYE at the mall and like buy them and sneak them in, and yeah, that was like the only rebellious thing I ever did. And then yeah, that's in my teens is when I really dove deep into the horror, but very secretly.
I like how horror was your teen rebellion stage.
A very secret rebellion, yes. My
I like
own
it.
personal rebellion.
Sounds good. Um, yeah, maybe if unless you had something else you were going to say, Katie, we can talk a little bit about kind of each of our kind of niches and some of our favorite subgenres of horror. Because I would argue, I guess we'll get into this more in a moment, but there are so many different types of horror that when someone's like, "I don't like horror," it's like, okay, well maybe you don't like blood and guts,
Mhm.
and then they're like, "Okay, but I like this," and I'm like, "Well, that's horror." So it's a really big genre, and I think I didn't fall in love with it until I found kind of again my niches. So I guess I can go first since I'm already talking your ear off. But I know for me, I really like feminist horror. So when it deals with like femininity and coming of age from a female perspective, any of those things. So like Sylvia Moreno Garcia, there's a new novella that I've been yelling about all year called Goddess of Filth, which is about a group of teen girls who are of American Mexican descent that play with a Ouija board. Things go wrong,
Mhm.
and it takes the possession and exorcist narrative and it like turns it on its head and it becomes this like fierce feminine anthem, and I love it so much. And so I really enjoy things like that. I've been known for liking body horror, like when things are happening to people's body. I find that really scary, and so for people who are trying to find horror and they're like, oh, nothing's scaring me, I think it's trying to figure out what works. I've
Mhm.
mentioned, I guess, already, like possession stories are some of my favorites. And I guess I used to probably read more indie, and I know lately I've been really focusing this last year on trying to read as much like new releases and kind of weigh in on what's good and what's not, depending
Mhm.
on if people share any of my tastes. But that's kind of some of it for me. If one, Katie, if you want to maybe go next.
Sure. I think for me, and this isn't, I was trying to think of a word for this and I was Googling this beforehand, and if maybe one of you know, but I've realized, especially recently, because I do think I read a little bit more on that line of thriller versus horror.
Mhm.
And I don't know if there's a word for that, but it's, with horror specifically, I found I really like, and I don't know what to call it, but self-aware horror. So, for example, I just finished My Heart is a Chainsaw and
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. And it's talking about the idea of what the final girl is. And I don't want to skip ahead and get into tropes, but and which ones we like and don't like. But I really, 12 Nights at Rotterhouse is another really good one, just where they're aware about the horror genre and sort of giving you recommendations throughout it.
Mhm.
So I love that. And then were we also saying least now, or should I wait?
We can go into it now if you want.
So I'd
Yeah.
say for least, it's important to me, for me, to really be interested in the villain. So if it's, so just personally, and I feel bad if this is someone's favorite, but I'm not super into, for example, zombie horror, only because I don't find them. I know, I had a feeling, Rachel. That's why I said that.
Okay, we're ending this live stream right now. We're done. Just jokes. Continue.
I do love
It's
Last of
very
Us, the
hit or
game.
miss.
The Last of Us, the game is great though.
That was good. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think for me, I like it when they have some sense of consciousness, because then I can get interested in them as a villain. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say. I'll let Cameron answer, and then if there's a question, but I'll let you go ahead, Cameron, if you want to share a bit
Cool.
of your niche and all that.
So my favorite horror niche is a good old classic slasher. I love a good slasher story, like you were talking about. My Heart is a Chainsaw, which I haven't read yet. I just not had
Oh,
time. But
you'll
I
love
want
it if you
to.
love
Yeah.
slashers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
so
Yeah.
so
meta
bad.
because I think the word,
Yeah.
Katie was
Yeah,
like
meta, that's
I always
right.
use meta as the word I
Yeah.
use. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
they're like,
meta.
they
Yeah.
know you're. It's like the characters, yeah, with Rotterhouse, they're like,
Hmm.
it's a, you take a skeptic who goes into a haunted house, doesn't believe a thing, and just goes through the tropes of the haunted house. I love it so much. He's playing with a Ouija board. He lets his phone die, but I've read so many of those, and I find those ones tend to be, I can get tired of them, especially with haunted house stories. I guess if we're going to talk least favorite, I'm like haunted house stories, vampires. I think, yeah, those are kind of my not so much, even though they're so popular, and my book club keeps picking them as themes. But sorry, I'm going down the rabbit hole there. I'll let you get back. Sorry, I'll let you keep
Oh
talking,
no, it's
Cameron.
okay. So yeah, a good old slasher. Eventually, I'll get to My Heart is a Chainsaw and Final Girl Support Group, which I still have not even
I
bought
don't
yet.
like it. I'm halfway through and I
I
don't
didn't.
like it. Oh, you didn't?
Yeah, I
Okay.
know.
I'm
I've heard
so
a lot
angry
of
how much I hate it.
a lot of people have been like, but
Yeah.
I have to read it because I love slashers.
Yeah.
If I didn't love slashers, I probably wouldn't pick it up. But even if people are saying they don't like it, I'm still gonna read it just because I need to read all the slashers. So like Kill River is just to me is like one of the best, and Disco Death Trap, both by Cameron Rubik. Those are like the best like slasher books out there that really capture the essence of a slasher. So that would have to be my favorite niche. Also, Rachel, I love a good haunted house story.
Yeah.
Why? It's like,
Same here.
oh, it's
I
like, just
love them.
go, right, go move.
That's why I loved Rotterhouse so much, was because it was like everything I loved about the haunted house genre. Very meta take on it. It was so much fun. But I even love like the simple haunted house stories like Darcy Coates. I love it. It's cozy, it's familiar. I don't know. I love settling in with a blanket and like a cup of coffee and just having a cozy old time. When it comes to least favorites, Rachel, I'm so sorry.
Is this another zombie? Do I have two zombie haters in the room?
Sorry.
We're both going to be cut off. It'll be a
Oh
single
yeah,
live stream.
yeah. I'm sorry. This is the shortest live stream in history.
And it's not even so much zombies as it is just post-apocalyptic.
I do understand that.
Yeah, like zombies. Night of the Living Dead, the original Night of the Living Dead film, is one of my all-time favorite movies. So it's not even so much zombies as it is just the survival aspect. I don't like, and I'm gonna already be getting into tropes
Yeah,
with this
let's
one
go
that I
there. Yeah,
don't.
let's just go there.
But just like people sitting around a campfire, all disgruntled, being like, yeah, my whole family turned and I had to kill them with my own hands. And I just, like, if I hear that monologue one more time, it just really gets on my nerves, because I find that they've become more about the humans, more about people are the real monsters, which is true in real life. But when I'm reading a horror story, I kind of like to escape. I don't really like to be reminded of the real world as often. Sometimes it's fine, but usually I like to just escape and read about fake horrors, because it's a little more fun, entertaining. And the zombie genre, I feel, has become a little depressing. But so that's kind of why. But yeah, sorry, Rachel.
That's okay. I was gonna say it's definitely one of the most controversial. It's pretty much, I think, you either love it or hate it. There isn't, I don't think, a lot of in between. And even I
Yeah.
admit, like if I go through some of my favorites, you'll hear me talk about in videos where I'm like, oh, I loved it, and the zombies are kind of in the background of a lot of those, where they're kind of
Yeah.
used
Yeah.
as a stepping point, and then it's more, a social commentary on this or that.
Yeah.
We can maybe just pause to answer Leanne's question if everyone wants to do a quick round robin. She's asking what
Yeah.
everyone's first horror book and film that you remember. So for me, for horror films, I think I watched The Ring growing up. Traumatized me. The next one I remember watching was the teen slasher House of Wax, the awful one with Paris Hilton.
Yeah.
So I got
It's
a
so good.
quality introduction.
When she gets spiked through the eye. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
So
for
good.
reading horror, I think it was Bird Box, which I didn't totally
Mm.
love. Unpopular opinion. I know it's at least one of your favorite, Katie. I don't know.
I
But
really
yeah,
liked it. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's payback for your zombie
Yeah.
hunting. Yeah.
Again,
What
it's
about
post-apocalyptic for me, so I
true?
was
There
like,
you
Yeah,
go.
true. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
Sandra Bullock.
How about you two with her question?
You can go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I think, and my brother's actually watching this, so this is relevant for him. But he would be getting, this is when I was really little, and he's 3 years older than me, and he would be getting tutoring, and so they would put me in like the kids section of the library to just go off and read for a couple hours after school. And I remember picking up a copy of Dracula, and I was only maybe 7 or 8 and reading the whole thing and just reading pieces. And that might sound impressive. And at the time, I remember thinking, wow, people, are really impressed I read Dracula at 7 years old. But looking back, it was very clearly like a very abridged
I was
children's
going to
version of
ask.
Dracula. Yeah. But I was so impressed with myself for years. And then it wasn't until I thought about it when I was older and I was like, no, you're reading a version for 10 years old, 10-year-olds.
It was like one of those great illustrated classics editions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very big font.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A picture on every page.
Yeah. So for books, and then for movies, it would have been whatever I was watching behind the couch while my parents were watching. So probably The Shining.
I have to say, you're so lucky that your parents finally let you just like join them on the couch.
Yeah.
I wish that could
Yeah.
have been the case.
Yeah.
For books, for me, of course, Goosebumps. That was the first scary books I ever read. Also, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and In a Dark, Dark Room. The girl with the ribbon around her neck. That was like the first thing where I'm like, ooh, I like this.
Yeah. Traumatizing. Yeah.
Yeah. So those were just like, man, life transformation moment for me. When it comes to movies, it's always a little unclear because I wasn't allowed to watch them from a young age, but there were a couple that I was able to watch when I was like 3 or 4 years old that I don't think my mom knew about. Like I remember when John Carpenter's Vampires came out in the late 90s. Not a good film. Not John Carpenter's best. It's got a lot of issues. But I remember watching that, and there's a scene where the vampires are like attacking a whole like room of people, and my sisters had rented it. I remember that, and I was watching it on the couch, and they're like, "Cameron, close your eyes," and I was like this, watching, trying to pretend like I had my eyes closed, when really I was watching. But the first movie that actually like scared me was not really a horror film per se, though I do kind of consider it one, is Return to Oz with Fairuza Balk. That movie was so scary for me. I don't know if you guys ever saw Return to Oz.
No, I haven't. Sorry.
Go on Disney Plus and watch it.
Is it a sequel, I assume, to Wizard of Oz?
Yes, it is. It came in the 80s. So it's years and years and years and years, decades after The Wizard of Oz. But Return to Oz sticks a little bit closer to the source material, to the original books. It is dark. It is scary. There are these things called the Wheelers, which are these creepy dudes with wheels on their hands and feet, and they wheel around.
Oh my
Oz has been like overtaken by this evil witch named Mombi, who can take off her head and replace her head with other people's heads. So she has like a room full of cabinets just filled with heads. And it's a Disney movie, but it is dark. It is.
Wow.
It was like during Disney's period where they were making live action movies that were insanely dark, and it is like this really screwed up fairy tale. So I recommend it. There's a scene in that movie that every time it came on, I would start screaming and crying, and my dad
Oh
would
my
run into the room and he would take the
Maybe that's
VHS
why they
tape.
didn't let you watch.
Yeah, he would take the VHS tape out, and then he'd leave, and I'd put it right back in and start the movie over again. And then I'd start crying at that same point. Finally, he threw the tape away in the trash can. And I remember like going over to the trash can and looking down into it. And I'm like, that's it. It's done. I can't watch it ever again now, even though I easily could have just reached in and grabbed it. But I'm like, no, that's it. I'm not able to watch it ever again. But
I like the
it's
person
so
saying,
good.
"Oh my God, the Wheelers" in the chat.
Yes, they're so scary.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh, sounds terrifying. So I thought maybe let's, since it sounds like we want to go to negative places, let's talk kind of, best and worst horror tropes and subgenres, and we can focus on the worst if we just want to get negative. So besides zombies, what else do you hate that I love?
I'm sure no
Break
one
my
likes.
heart.
I'm sure both of you hate this. And what comes to mind is if anybody saw Till Death, the movie that came out recently with Megan Fox. And I love Megan Fox. So I was actually really upset that I didn't like the movie, but that has this trope, and I was Googling what it's called, and it's called the lost critical item trope, where everything hinges on not having one item. So this isn't a horror movie, but I guess Cameron would hate it because it's a disaster movie, but Greenland, that movie, and 75% of it is the tensions built just because the little kid is diabetic and they're trying to find his insulin. Of course, the kid forgets the insulin. So it's not the movie itself that's scary.
Mhm.
And I can't think of books that come to mind with it, but I'm sure they are. But it's like when someone can't find their keys or they can't find their phone, and everything really hinges around that. I just think it's a cop out and really boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be boring for sure. Yeah, I've not seen that movie yet, but I do love Megan Fox. I love Jennifer's Body. That movie's so
Yeah,
good.
and that's
Oh, I
why I
think
was
you meant
so
like, yeah,
excited
her
for it.
body. I was like, okay, if you're really into her.
Yeah,
It's taking a
I
weird
was like,
turn,
that's
but no, I
funny.
love that movie.
me
Yeah.
too.
And that's why I was so excited for this. But there's, without giving anything away, there's the first 40 minutes are her just looking for an item to be able to cut something on herself. And like, that's 40 minutes of it. Just her slowly wandering around the house looking for like a saw. So it's pretty boring.
Yeah, that does sound really boring.
Yeah, my husband loses his keys like every day. So it's just like, that doesn't sound like, it sounds scary. It sounds monotonous in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
So one that came to mind for me, which it's almost one that I love and hate depending on how it's done, is whether it be in books or movies, the idea of like, is the person crazy or is something supernatural actually going on? Like, I love the premise, and it definitely, like, I'd say most of my favorite, horror things play with that. But I will say, and I can't really talk about which books do this, but I hate when it turns out in the end that nothing was going on, that they were just crazy the whole time.
Yeah.
It really, really bugs me, even though I know like it's playing within that line. But I guess I want it always to end up being supernatural if you're going to call it a horror book. So I just get
I'm
bugged
thinking
by
of a
that one.
book I know that we both disliked
Yes.
recently,
Yeah.
but we can't say it out loud because it's
Yeah.
still a book.
Exactly. How do you fall on that one, Cameron?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of horror tropes that I love just because I love horror. So there's very little that I really dislike. I think I talked a little bit about the whole like apocalyptic thing, survivors around a campfire. That's like the one that just really just gets on my nerves. I don't really know why exactly. It just does. Um, But yeah, when it comes to the whole, are they really crazy or is it really something supernatural? I like that setup, but I too like there to actually be a payoff at the end and not just, oh, they were in an asylum in a straitjacket this entire time and we've just been inside their head.
Yeah.
That's one thing
Yeah.
that I really don't like. Or the whole dream scenario, you know, like, oh, it was all a dream. Yeah,
L-
that sucks.
Yeah.
But like The Witch, you know, the movie The Witch, you're thinking, well, they very well could just be completely crazy because they kind of are at the beginning of the movie. That's kind of why they're being sent away. It's because they're a little not there. But I like at the end of the movie that there actually is a witch because
Yeah.
it's called The Witch and we need a witch. So yeah, I gotta agree with you there. I do like there to be a payoff.
Yeah.
The
Leanne
witch is
makes.
traumatizing. When they're
Yeah.
sorry, this is about to get graphic, but it's not a spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen it. The first 10 minutes, but nothing. I remember that's the most I've been disturbed in the theater in a really long time when you realize because it's so subtle that they're like grinding a baby up, like which sounds so yeah. They don't show
I
it,
have
but
not seen that.
you can hear the sound. And I
Yeah.
was like looking around, I was like, wait, is this what's happening? I was like,
Yeah.
I think this is what's happening.
That's a start for sure. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to
Oh,
take
it's
a
how she makes her
shower.
broom fly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Leanne agreed with it. She made a good point that she said it either wants a book to go in a supernatural direction or leave it up to the reader to decide. And I do agree. I guess I'd love to know what you guys think. I love an ambiguous ending as long as it's purposely done and not,
Mhm.
you feel like the author forgot a page. But
Mm,
I actually really like that. Like, because those are the books that will leave me thinking about it for a long time. But some people hate
Yeah.
ambiguous endings.
yeah, and I've talked about this on my channel too, and ambiguity is fine with me. I like, for instance, I loved Paul Tremblay's Head Full of Ghosts, which I feel like even though the ending is a big ambiguous and it leaves it up to the reader, you know that he knows. Like when I read that book, I
Mhm.
was like, yeah, he knows what's actually going on here, and the puzzle pieces are all there in the book, and you just need to kind of fit them
Yep.
together.
Yeah.
So what I don't like is when an author kind of has ambiguity there for just the sake of ambiguity. And they're like, oh, well, I mean, this goes back to Bird Box for me personally with Josh Mallerman. He's always like, well, you know, I didn't want to say like what the monsters actually are, what they are. And I was like, well, there's obviously something there. So give us something to go off
Yeah.
instead of just being like, well, I know what they are, but I'm like, yeah, but there's really no clues or hints or anything. Like I want a hint. Like I want to be able to put it together myself. So I guess it, ambiguity is fine as long as there is something for me to go off of and try to
Yeah.
figure. Other than just like, is it or isn't it?
And I love what you said about the author knows, because
Mhm.
normally I love ambiguous endings, but for some reason, the one that really comes to mind is the one time I really hated it. And I know there's a lot of people's favorite book, and I love 95%, but Night Film always got under my skin. And maybe it's been so long since I've read it. And maybe for people who, because a lot of people, it's their favorite book. And so maybe it is clear what the ending is, but I always felt, especially with all the clues and using your phone with the book, for all the clues,
Mhm.
I always felt like the author didn't know what the ending was to solve the mystery. And maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but that one I remember just infuriating me when it ended. But normally I like ambiguous endings.
Gotcha. I
And I,
have that book. I just haven't read it yet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
disappointed to hear
Ah,
that.
and
Yeah.
I would say, and I was gonna say, I hate to ever disagree with you that I didn't think the ending was ambiguous at all. I was actually,
Oh,
I guess, like,
really?
oh, and
See,
I
it's
guess
been years. I barely remember the book.
yeah, and that's the thing too is like I have seen that with other people that sometimes an ending can be interpreted as ambiguous, but my brain probably then went and was like, well, clearly it's this, and it went down one avenue, and I just thought that was it. So we'll have to, yeah, maybe talk spoilers
Yeah.
after, but because that was my complaint is that I thought the book was so creepy and like I said, the details and all of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then what
Yeah.
it led up to in my mind of what I remember the ending being, I'm like, it was a letdown.
Yeah. All
But
I
I,
remember, maybe it wasn't
yeah.
open. I just remember it being so creepy and anxiety inducing. And then the end, I just remember being very angry. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one. Someone made a good comment about, when it's all just a dream, kind of tying in again to it, not actually being anything real. I agree with that. And I'm going to actually just bank off of that. That one thing I had written down was I hate, and I guess I see this in books. I'm sure it happens in movies. I can't think of one offhand, but you'll be reading a book and you'll start a new chapter and like something like creepy starts happening. And it's just like, the person and like there's like things and like grabbing, like the book just like suddenly gets absolutely scary and terrifying and you're like, "Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
what is happening?" And then the
Mhm.
character wakes up and nothing, it was
Yeah.
just a dream. I get so bugged by that because it feels to me that the author is trying to demonstrate their ability to write really creepy scenes, but
Mhm.
like it's just I don't know. Like to
Without
me,
actually going
yeah,
there.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
find it very frustrating. There was one book I read and where the author had like dream sequence after dreams and it kept being like, "Oh, this is no, it's another dream." And I was getting so
Yeah.
Yeah.
annoyed.
I think
Yeah.
I can think of one book, but I can't say it because it gives away the ending. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
have
it
a
happened.
couple of those.
Maybe we're thinking of the same one because it was,
Mhm.
oh, that's the twist. Oh, it's the same twist again. Oh, it's the same twist again.
Yeah.
4
Mhm.
times in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh, hi,
like to
Dana.
know when the dream is happening. Like, I don't like them to go into it and kind of like fake you out, make you think, "Oh
Yeah.
man, this is getting crazy," and then at the end of it, "Oh, never mind, it was just a
Yeah.
dream," and then you go back to the same old boring stuff. So, like the book I'm writing now opens up with a dream sequence,
Oh, I'm
and I
so
make
sorry. I
sure
love dream sequences. They're
no,
wonderful.
and I make sure at the beginning that I say in the very first line, "This is a dream," but also
Yeah.
the whole book kind
Because
of
then you
hinges
don't feel
on
the
this
reader
dream.
doesn't feel
Yeah.
cheated. So yeah.
Right. Because
Yeah.
the whole book kind of hinges on this dream and like what it means and how
No.
it parallels life and stuff.
That
So,
sounds great. And yeah, you make the exact perfect point that to me it's the fake out. It's the idea of I'm going to
mhm.
scare them by making them think this is real and it's
It's
exactly. It's
cheap.
like I don't want to be tricked. If you're going
Mhm.
to grab and like pull someone's arms off, like you better go and like follow
Yes.
through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh,
Really do it.
exactly. And there Cindy says, yeah, the dream serves an actual purpose. I'm okay with that. I'd
Yes.
agree with that.
Me too.
Uh, let's see. Yeah, any other tropes? I guess final girl trope. Does everyone like that? I know it can be controversial.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Except final, and I'm not won't vent about the book too much because I'm only 60% of the way through and I won't spoil anything. But I
Mhm.
think because I think Final Girl is such a universally loved trope. And again, My Heart is a Chainsaw does it so well. And it was weird reading that and then Final Girl support group back to back because I loved longest title in the world. What is it? Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires so
Mhm.
much. And then Final Girl support group is about all these final girls in a support group together and they slowly start getting killed off. And it's like, how can you take that but make it really boring? That's what the book
Mhm.
does. But normally I love it.
Yeah. Trying to think of if there's any other ones. Otherwise, we can move on to another question. Like I said, it's almost more fun talking about the ones we do hate. I know, we hit on some, and even like subgenres. Like I guess, so you don't like zombies. Do you both of you like vampire fiction? Because that's one I really struggle with. But I think you've even done videos on it. Katie, because you kind of again we're in booktube in the kind of post Twilight years where people are like,
Yeah.
we want
Yeah.
vampires, but can they please not sparkle?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't read a good one, and maybe one of you or people in the chat have recommendations. I haven't read a new vampire book that I really like in a long time, but I was obsessed, and that was all I read for years. And if this is young adult, but I remember rereading this little book. It's not very popular called Companions of the Night over and over and over again. Oh, have you
Yes.
read it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. I
I'm
read that middle
obsessed with
school.
it to like a weird
Oh, so
degree.
good.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a great
So
one.
normally I love it, but I haven't found new ones lately that I really like.
Yeah.
I love vampires. I will say once Twilight came out and I started seeing it just like spiral out of control, I stayed away from vampires for a long time. Not because I all of a sudden just hated vampires. I was like, I don't want to get sick of vampires. So I'm going to just like get away while it's going down more of a paranormal route and not really horror because I like my vampires to be bloodthirsty, like Companions of the Night was so good. And I love Interview with the Vampire. I love Anne Rice, even
Mhm.
though they're they are kind of the whiny vampires. I feel like they, they're still, bloodthirsty, and it's still dark. It's dark as hell. So yeah, when it comes to newer vampire books, I read one by Glenn Rolfe called Until Summer Comes Around. I really loved that book. That was a really cool, like 80s Lost Boys vampire kind of book.
What was it
So I
called
would
again?
recommend that one if you want to find like a new vampire book.
What
was
was
the
the
name?
title?
Until Summer Comes Around. I know I've got it
Okay.
on my shelves somewhere, but it's probably
I'll
never
type
find
it
it.
here so I forget.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, someone put the Gilda stories. That's one I've been meaning to read that I've heard is so good.
Yeah. You will put, I think,
Actually,
put that one on my radar. This I just actually reread this one, Let the Right One In. I agree
Yeah.
that one. I think most people are familiar with the movie. I read it the first time and was like, oh, it's just okay. It wasn't what I was expecting because again, I think you have a young girl presenting as a vampire, and so I think I liked it because it broke a lot of the kind of sexualization you normally see around vampires, which just isn't my
Mhm.
favorite since I'm kind of lean away from romance in my stories. But that one, like, oh, it's just it's such a dark story, and it's very much a story where the people are far worse than the supernatural creatures in it. But
Mhm.
that one, I yeah, just reread it a couple weeks ago, and I got to say that's probably up there in my top vampire stories now. Really holds up. Like honestly, I got so much more out of it the second time around. Uh,
You still need to read that.
yeah. Has
Yeah, same.
either
Yeah.
either of you read? Definitely recommend it. Either of you read was it Empire of a Vampire? That's the
No.
Jay Kristoff. I know it's getting a lot of buzz. I haven't read any of his other
It's like
stuff,
this
so
big.
yeah.
I work for my local library on the bookmobile, and we are in the processing office where they process all the books for the library. And I remember walking through that office and seeing it on the shelf. I'm like, what is that? And I got up close. I'm like, oh, it's that book. I was like, I had it on
Uh,
my wish list, and I took it off my wish list because it's just too big and I don't have time.
yeah, you could read that book or 10 other books. There we
Yeah,
go.
it's too
Yeah.
big. One
Eric
day,
shares.
but not right now.
Yeah. And I think all three of us like this book. It looks like they're just starting I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. So hopefully they
Yes.
enjoy it as much as I think all three of well, no, you've seen the movie. I still
Yeah,
am
I've
trying to
seen the
get you to read the
movie.
book. Ah,
Yeah, and I
the
felt so
movie's
bad
not
because
good.
I know because I saw the movie and then you did a video on
Yeah.
recommending books to horror
Mhm.
book reviewers and you put me and you said, "Oh, I hope she hasn't seen the movie." And I was like, I just finished watching it like an hour before. So now
Oh,
I
I
already
didn't
know
know
the
it was that
ending.
close. Oh,
Yeah.
Uh,
oh.
yeah, I love that book, and I read it when it first came out. It's one of the only books that I went to Barnes and Noble and I saw it, and I'm like, "What is that?" And I picked it up off the new release table. I never pay like full price for books, but I did for that one, and I like read it all that night. It was just like it
So
just grabbed me, and I couldn't put it down. And then the movie, I felt like it was pretty close to the book up to a certain point, and then it just like crumbled.
yeah. I try not to watch the adaptations of my favorite books because I just find like what I like to read just doesn't always translate well into the screen.
Mhm.
People were asking our thoughts on werewolves.
Love werewolves.
They're all fluffy and like they're
The,
They're
basically big
adorable.
dogs.
the reason I'm laughing is because I have one regret, and maybe I'll delete the video eventually, but when you search my name on YouTube, it's now one of the top things that, for ChapterStackss, it now comes up, and I'm blanking on what it's called. But one of my friends is a romance novelist, and when she goes to the convention, she gets a ton of free books. And she gave me one that's, I don't even want to say because my family's watching this, but it's really intense and horrible. And I did like a funny review of it. And now when you search, I just picture my coworkers, and again, I don't even want to say what it's called. You all can look it up after. But
Is it a
normally I
werewolf
like
book?
werewolves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's werewolf.
Oh, I think and now I remember it. Yes, yes. We can tell you afterwards. It's quite good. And that's always the funny thing too with YouTube is even like just the videos that go viral or do well. Like I don't know if you've had that experience. Like I was saying to a friend that one of my best performing videos I ever did was the scariest books I've ever read. And you might have seen the thumbnail. I'm like holding up and
Mhm.
like screaming at the
mhm.
books and all that. Well, it was like my son randomly took like a nap. It wasn't planned for. I think my hair was wet. It was storming outside, so there was like tons of background noise, and I was like, oh, I've got like, 10 free minutes. What can I do in like 10 minutes of a video? And then it ended up, like I said, it's one of my most watched.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I wish I put a little bit more like effort into that.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
I was so unprepared. And people like fact check me all the time on the video. I was like talking off the cuff. It was not my finest.
Yeah.
And
Dana
that's the
in the
one
chat,
video
yeah.
that
Yeah, Dana,
When-
that reminds me. Yeah, it's something. It's an inappropriate word for Bigfoot. That's what it's
yeah.
called.
Thank you, Dana. Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, everyone's voting on. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of love for werewolves. I just struggle to find books. I really want to do a
Mm.
recommendation video on werewolves, but I struggle to find enough that I enjoy. There's a few, and like I've read a lot of bad ones. Like I read one about a stay-at-home dad who like became a vampire or became a werewolf just to like find other dad friends. I was like, this isn't even horror. Why am I reading this? It was
Yeah.
bad. It was pretty bad. I guess we got about it's about 2:40 here. Well, in my time zone.
Mhm.
Maybe let's kind of lump together. I think people would probably love for us to do some recommendations. So, we were going to talk about advice for people wanting to get into horror. I know probably a lot of people watching this already into it, and so maybe also
Mhm.
tying in with book and movie recommendations to kind of get us in the spooky spirits. So, we can kind of, if you want, kind of go around a little bit and talk about that. So. In terms of, I guess, like starting places, like I guess for each of you, what's kind of your go-to when someone's like, "Oh, I've never read horror. What should I read?" How
Mhm.
do you deal with that that fun question?
Katie?
Sure. I normally will ask them what types of books they normally read because I forget if it was one of you was saying this at the beginning, but there are so many subgenres of horror. So if I know what types of books they normally read, then there's
Mhm.
some type of offshoot. And just as an example, what comes to mind, even though it's not young adult, I think if someone reads a ton of young adult Mexican Gothic, even though it's not young adult, I think that can be a really good segue into it. Or if they've read mystery novels, but maybe not really dark ones, then maybe reading Karen Slaughter, just like a more extreme, so kind of almost like
Mhm.
a more extreme version of
Yeah,
what they're already reading.
Mhm. I
yeah,
totally agree with that because there are so many different kinds of horror. And like I said, I work on the bookmobile, so I see like 300 kids a day that come through and they're like, "Where are all the cool books?" I'm like,
What is the
"Well,
bookmobile?
the bookmobile,
Yeah.
it is a bus full of books, so it's a mobile library. Instead of kids coming to the
Oh,
library,
that's
we'll drive to their
awesome.
school and they come on and pick out books and
Oh,
stuff.
that's fun.
So kids will come on the bookmobile and be like, "Hey, where are the cool books?" And I'm like, "Well, kid, what do you think is cool? Because what you think is cool isn't going to be what someone else thinks is cool." So then I have to like interrogate them and quiz them on what they like. And it's the same thing for adults. I feel like adults should kind of know by now that there's a bunch of different kinds and it's all going to hinge on what your tastes are. So I always have to be like, "Well, what do you like and what turns you off?" That's a big thing in horror. If people don't like a lot of gore, then I know I could stay away from a certain kind of book. um, so yeah, I usually will interrogate them a little bit, ask them questions about what they like, what they don't like, and then kind of go from there. But I think the general thing that I tend to recommend if I don't have answers about their personal reading taste is just go back to what you read as a kid. I mean, I'm sure all of us have read something spooky when we were a kid. Maybe just go back to that. Go back to your roots, start there, figure out if you still like things like that, and then branch off. Also, we live in a great age where you can go to YouTube and type in horror book recommendations or go to Instagram and hashtag horror books, and you will be set. You just have to do a little work for yourself, and you're good.
I like this response when they ask where are the cool books.
Oh,
You just like go and like shove this in their face and say like,
thank
"Well, there
you.
you go." That's pretty
Thank you.
great. One thing I wanted to mention, just because I think it always comes up, and I love this time of year on YouTube because suddenly all of these booktubers who don't talk or about horror whatsoever suddenly come out of the woodwork with their recommendations, their TBRs, and
Mhm,
everyone's reading horror for a month. And so a big thing I see is that you'll click on a video, and I'm not thinking of anyone's particular, so this is not attacking anyone, that
mhm,
they'll say, here's a list of books, horror books for beginners or horror books for newbies, and and they'll preface it by saying basically these are books that anyone can read. Basically it's books intended for what they call scaredy cats, which I fully
mhm,
acknowledge there are people who don't read horror because they don't want to be scared. I was the opposite in a way. Basically, I did not enjoy or get into horror until I started to find books that actually did scare me.
Mhm.
So that's the one thing I
Mm,
guess I would caveat. Like I'd have to again like ask the person. So if it's well, I want to try horror, but I don't want something really bloody and violent. Absolutely, I'm not going to like shove something disturbing in their face. But I've had it where someone says I can't get into horror. I find it boring. Nothing scares me. And so that I would say, I'd actually consider recommending like different books to them and actually not necessarily
mm,
the most disturbing book I've ever read or something, but they might be actually more interested in something like, some of the classics like, The Exorcist. I don't know where my camera is apparently, The Exorcist, things like that.
yeah.
And so I'm always, I guess, cautious that just because someone is new to horror doesn't mean that they can't handle something scary, in my
Mhm.
Mm,
opinion, unless they say that, that's what they want, which I
Yeah.
completely respect. I have no problem with that. But I
mm,
feel like some people miss out on horror. Yeah, like they literally just say, oh, it's nothing scary. I'm like, well, what do people keep recommending you? They're like, well, like this young adult book, this one, this like suspense. And I was like, okay, well,
mm,
like let's give you something good and like meaty then
Yeah.
and see how
yeah.
it goes.
I was
Right.
reading an article the other day, and I don't want to switch topics too much, but
Nope.
Rachel, when you were saying you didn't like it until you actually got scared, and just because my background's in psychology, I've been planning a video around why psychologically people like horror. And there are really interesting studies that find that it releases a lot of dopamine because we get excited and it's a sense of arousal, but then afterwards your brain's forced to calm yourself down. So it's actually helpful for people with anxiety because it forces your brain to relax you
Yeah.
kind
Hmm.
of after it ends.
Yeah. And I think a lot of
Interesting.
people say this. I agree that I would say horror is very comforting to me at this
Hmm.
point. I don't know
Yeah.
if you guys find
Mm,
that too, that when I'm feeling anxious, like my husband's like, "Oh, I'm feeling so anxious." And he's like, "What book are you reading?" And I'll describe the premise. And he's like, "That's calming you down?
Yeah.
That's what you're doing in your downtime on this stressful day?" I was like, "Yes, like at least like I've got all my limbs right now, so I'm feeling much better about myself
Yeah.
yeah.
than this poor sucker."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel that because real life can be really scary, and I don't get scared of books. Like I very very rarely, every once in a while something will
Hmm.
come through. I'm like, yeah, that kind of creeped me out. But usually no. Usually I'm much more scared by real life. That's why I like to escape through my books, just to get away from it for a minute. So to me, like horror is just fun. I never really find
Hmm.
myself bored with it. I like all of the different kinds of genres because it's almost always entertaining, and
Hmm.
that's just my taste. I like lots of crazy, so I tend to, if I want something fun, I'll go for like I said, a slasher, or just balls to the wall crazy. Independent books especially have a lot of those. So
Mhm. Yeah, it sounds like Dana said Rosemary's Baby is calming me down right now. I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That was one of my Halloween recommendations. Love it. Yeah.
Ah, perfect. And yeah, unless you have anyone else has any specific advice they want to share about kind of getting into horror, maybe do you want to segue, kind of use the last 10 minutes just to recommend, like I said, books and movies for Halloween or otherwise, whether it be for newbies or like I said, I know a lot of people watching assumingly are already horror fans. So,
mhm.
just to hear. But I've been talking a lot, so I'll let one of you guys go.
This isn't a recommendation, but it's just something I was thinking that I've been doing lately because I'm so aware, and I think everybody is, of all the horror movies that are out there. And I've been almost similar to when we've been talking about comfort. And this is not embarrassing, but I've been watching a lot of horror episodes of TV shows I watched growing up. So I'll actively look up like the Even Stevens Halloween episode of the Lizzie
Yes,
McGuire Halloween
Yeah.
episode. Yeah.
that's what I've been doing.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
I'll
just watched
literally
a bunch of
search on
Rugrats Halloween
IMDb.
specials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's probably not the type of recommendations people are looking for, but that's what I've been doing lately. And then, but if people want maybe a more obscure recommendation for a movie, I really love The Innocents from, it's like 1961. And it's,
It's a
I
great
think,
movie.
loosely based off The Turn of the Screw, but it's
Mhm.
just really atmospheric. Rachel would love it because it's sort of in a haunted house. But,
Gee,
but
thanks.
yeah. So that'd be for movies. And then for books, I was thinking about it. And because I read so much on the line of thriller and horror, I was getting sad because I was thinking about it, like which ones give me that cozy Halloween feeling. And like none of the books I do read do except maybe 12 Nights at Rotterhouse. Because I read a lot of serial killer books. And I almost get the impression with adult fiction, they're scared of setting stuff around Halloween because I think they're worried it's going to feel too tropey. But like, I just want everything to be set during Halloween. But I love like Pen Pal, Lock and Key. Those kind of give me a little bit of that cozy Halloween feeling.
Yeah.
Well, like I said before we went live, that I have a nice big stack here.
Yay.
I'm not going to take too much time.
That's what I was like, I'll just let Connor go.
Yeah. Yeah, go Cameron.
So one of my all-time favorites of all time, and I'm sure most everybody has seen this, though I am finding out that there are a lot of people out there who still have not seen this, and I find it surprising. But most of us here probably have, and that is Trick or Treat. One of my all-time favorite Halloween movies. It's so good. Rachel, you need to watch it.
What? Let's just start this whole section by Rachel is horribly underwatched in horror movies. My patron book club constantly is like, you haven't read that or sorry, watched that. So this will be the last 10 minutes of Rachel shame. Carry on.
I only have a couple movies. So this one is like my ultimate, next to like Hocus Pocus. This is the one. It's so good. It has all the Halloween vibes. So just putting it there. One book that I always recommend is The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. A lot of people have read that one, but not a lot of people know about the animated movie.
Is that Disney too?
It is actually, cartoon. I think it was like Cartoon Network TV movie. It's from 1993. It's so good, so heartfelt, and just one of my favorite movies to pop on every Halloween night. I think it's a good way to wrap up Halloween. Now, this is an obscure one. This one, a lot of people don't talk about, and it makes me so sad. This is a TV movie from 2001, so it's just now celebrating its 20-year anniversary. This came on ABC Family when I was a kid. It's an R.L. Stine movie called When Good Ghouls Go Bad, starring Christopher Lloyd. And it's a really cute movie about this kid that moves to this town where Halloween is banned. They don't celebrate it because there's this curse from this kid named Curtis Danko who died, years ago. And he put a curse on the town that if they ever celebrate another Halloween, he'll come back and destroy them all. So they're just terrified of Halloween. And this kid loves Halloween. So, and his family owns like the old candy factory that went out of business when the town banned Halloween. So they want to bring the candy factory back. And of course, once they start trying to bring Halloween back, the curse is unleashed and Curtis Danko comes back. But you find out it may not be exactly what it seems. So good. I hate that people don't know about this movie. So I think you can go on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it's
I was just going to ask if you can stream it. Yeah.
I don't think it's streaming anywhere, but YouTube is probably your best bet. It's got all the Halloween vibes. It's also very heartfelt, and Christopher Lloyd is just magnificent. There's also a novelization of the movie written by R.L. Stine. I don't know where you can get this. I know it's out of print, but it's also really good. So that's kind of like a little middle grade recommendation for you. I have a couple more middle grade ones. Of course, Goosebumps Haunted Mask, one of the best Halloween stories of all time. Another one that's really good that a lot of people don't really recommend is Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. Another really good Goosebumps Halloween story. But if you've already read Goosebumps, then I would recommend the Monster Street series by J.H. Reynolds, which is a middle grade. This is called The Halloweeners, about these kids that start turning into their Halloween costumes. So it's a lot like The Haunted Mask. It's so cute. It's so cute. And it made me cry because it's just so full of heart, and it's about, family and friends, and it's just everything I love. So read it. It's good. All the other Monster Street books are good too. For YA, I would say the Hocus Pocus sequel is actually pretty damn good.
I didn't even know that existed.
It's the Hocus Pocus sequel. I did not have high hopes for this. I thought it would be kind of a cash grab, but I actually really ended up loving this. I know they're not going to go with the story of this for the movie that's about to come out. I think it's next year, so we got a long time to wait. But I thought this was really well done overall. Really surprised me. For adult horror, I really loved Red Harvest by Patrick C. Green. It's cozy but gory. It's supernatural. It's slasher. It's got everything. So if you love all of it, this is great. And it's got all the Halloween vibes. It's small town. Everybody's getting ready for Halloween. there's a killer on the loose, crazy stuff is happening. So yeah, that's everything. I have a couple more here, but I've been talking for a while.
No, those were great. I'm gonna have to go
Yeah,
back and rewatch this and take notes.
I know. I
Yeah,
was thinking the same thing.
I can email you a list of the titles if you want.
Yeah.
I love someone in the chat said, "You're scaring me, Carly Beth." Yeah.
Yeah, that's
What's
a
that
great one.
referencing?
That's from
So
the Haunted Mask,
yeah.
where she figures out that the mask is stuck to her face. She's like, "My eyes, these aren't my eyes.
Yeah.
Who am I?"
I remember the scene where the kid comes out, her brother's always trying to scare her, and he was wearing a duck costume and the feathers,
Yeah.
but it terrified me when I was little.
The kid was a jerk.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I'll chat a little bit about a couple of my horror movie and book favorites. So I just watched Hereditary because, yes, I'm the last person on the planet. Have you seen it? I think you did a video on it, Katie. I assume you've seen it as well, Cameron?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So that one just blew my mind. And basically, honestly, the reason I don't read more or watch more horror, rather, is that I don't love to watch movies by myself. I just don't find it as fun. And I'm always trying to convince my husband to do that. And it's like, usually this time of year, he'll kind of watch a couple with me. Well, one random night, like I went to bed early and he stayed up with his friends online. And so the next day he's like, "So I watched this movie Hereditary with my friends." I was like,
Uh,
"What? Why did you watch it without me?" So then he agreed to he loved it so much. So he agreed to rewatch it. So we had some friends over. That book is, or book, geez, you can tell I read too much.
Mhm.
Movie is so well plotted and just, it's one that I can see why my husband wanted to rewatch it because you start to pick up
mhm.
all the things. And there were certain scenes where visually there were things happening on like the corner of the screen, if you know what I'm talking about. And I missed
Yeah.
it. And so he was not watching me. He was basically just watching me to see if I was picking up certain things and they were going over my head. And then afterwards we were rewinding the movie and he was like, "Well, you missed this and then this referenced that." And you see it all. So I highly recommend that one. Not not an underhyped one at all, but really worth seeing. Also really
Mhm.
like, is Jordan Peele the writer director on Us and Get Out, I
Mhm.
think are two of my favorites of modern ones.
Mhm.
And yeah, when it comes to books, I'm going to just put this out there only because I think Cameron is too classy of a booktuber to ever push himself as an author. For anyone watching this who's not aware, oh, and this is the shiniest thing ever. But he has written Autumn Crow, which is a collection of short stories all set in a town where I believe every day is Halloween. And
Mhm.
Cameron Rubik, one of my other favorite authors, did his cover art, which I definitely accidentally did his cover reveal for him on YouTube.
Oh
So
my god.
I forever will feel horrible about that.
It's
Because I like
fine.
posted and you're like, yeah, I was like, I uploaded the wrong file.
Oh my god.
It's okay.
So the fact that Cameron is still speaking to me is
It's
a
all right.
testament to what a nice guy he is. But I do
Mistakes happen.
recommend that one. So I just want to mention this because, like I said,
Is that video still now I want to go watch it.
it's, yeah, one of my old like anticipated videos of the fall. So he would be so kind to share with me the file, and I was like, "Well, I'm doing this video. I'll put it in there." And then he ended up saying like for reasons he had to push back his own announcement.
Mhm.
And so I was like, "No problem." I went back to my editing, deleted the thing, uploaded the wrong file again, and posted it without triple checking it. So sure enough, everyone's like seeing, and he's like messaged me. He's like, "Yeah, it was still in there." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
I
But
went
I feel like
ahead
anyway,
and I
I'm gonna
was
go
like,
to the
yeah.
I went ahead and just put up the announcement as soon as I saw the
I'm
video. I was
so
like,
sorry.
well, it's cool. We'll
Uh,
go ahead and we'll reveal it now. It's
uh,
got to be revealed anyway. So it's
let's
like,
go for the record. Cameron is a classy guy.
because I'm picturing if I went to the video, just a comment from Cameron Penn to delete this.
Yeah, what is
Probably not.
wrong with you? You're dead to me, and I hate
Angry
zombie
emojis.
fiction. Yeah.
no.
He was very sweet about it. And then, like, honestly, I feel like a bit of a cliche. Like, even though I really like to try to read underhyped horror, when it comes to like Halloweeny horror, even like you said, it doesn't necessarily be set around Halloween, but I do find myself going to things like, again,
Yeah.
my lighting is terrible here, like Pet Cemetery by Stephen King, definitely my all-time favorite. Again, something like The Exorcist. Like, to me, there's reasons that those books are classic.
Mhm.
Another book, I guess, just for those that are looking for something underhyped, one that I would love to reread this season or next year for sure is Ghost Radio. And that's, I would recommend for anyone who likes horror on audio. So if you're, like crocheting, like, I don't know, some like scary pumpkin or, for those that craft and, want something to listen to, the book lends itself well to audio because of the fact that it's all centered around a radio show. So the radio show first took place in Mexico in this fictional story, and it's just people calling into this radio show sharing their ghost stories. And then the main character, when he was a child, remembered listening to the show, and then he recreated it when he moved to America. And so the story is partially the story of this radio announcer, or like, I guess host of this show. And then it's interspliced with all of these ghost stories of people calling in. So you get these little ghost stories
Oh, wow.
throughout. And it's narrated by, someone has to help me. I'm the worst with actor names. He's the actor who played, he was the Mandalorian, the main guy.
Oh,
He
Oh,
yes.
was
Pedro Pascal?
Yes, thank you. So
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
narrates it and he is brilliant. But I've got to say, it is like so slow paced and it seems like it's going nowhere. I always talk about like needing narrative drive, needing to know where the story is going. I nearly DNF'd it because it was like so slow. But then I kept going, ended up driving in the middle of the night in like the pitch black on the highway, and it just got so creepy. And it has one of the best horror endings I have ever read. I loved it so much. So I'm just going to mention that if anyone's reading it and going like, okay, where's it going? Where's it going? It is worth the payoff. Do not DNF or drop it partway through. Um, but yeah, really recommend that one. So that was kind of like I said, something a little more underhyped because I always kick myself that, if anything, if I was ever going to, talk about, again, people who do like horror recommendation videos this time of year, is that I feel a bit more pressured to perhaps bring something a
Mhm.
little bit more underhyped.
Mhm.
While I totally
Yeah.
recognize, like, if someone
Yeah.
only reads a couple horror books a year, their recommendation list might be just kind of listing off the classics or the, 5 or 6
Mhm.
Stephen King books they've read. And I
Yeah.
feel pressured to kind of come up with something a little bit more
Mhm.
underhyped.
Same here. I try to stay away from Stephen King for that reason. While I like reading his books, I don't usually talk about his books on my channel because
Mhm.
everybody's already
Yeah.
heard about them. Like,
Yeah.
even when a new Stephen King book comes out, I'm not in a rush to read it because I know everybody's going to read it and they're not going to need my suggestion. They can do
Yeah.
it on their own. Um, and yeah, like I've not heard of Ghost Radio before, but I'm definitely
Mhm.
gonna look that up. And
It's
that's
really
also
good.
another reason why I very rarely will DNF a book because especially if I'm gonna review it, I need to know if it's gonna pay off in the end. Like the ending could save this whole thing. And it could all be building up to something, and I'm just not aware yet because I've not gotten there.
Yeah.
So I need to look that up. That sounds really cool,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
especially
really
the audio.
yeah, it should be on Hoopla if your library has that.
Cool.
Ghost
Yeah,
Radio. I'm
Love
gonna add
yeah.
it.
But yeah, I think you both would really like it. It's so smart. And yeah, it's like it's one of my nice little like again like those kind of underhyped cards that I get to like pick up and be
Yeah.
like, well, have you heard of this one?
Never heard of
So
it. You
awesome.
got me.
So I guess we're coming about up to the hour mark here. I guess does anyone have any kind of final questions or comments, things, if we want to sneak in any kind of last recommendations? I definitely enjoyed, yeah, because I going down the negative rabbit hole of things that we hated because I think that's fun. Like, I mean, and I honestly, like, I'm more likely to kind of, I guess, DNF a book than finish it just to give it a rant review. So it's kind of fun, I think, just to get to,
Yeah.
we didn't necessarily name a lot of book names, but to kind of, rip into some of the subgenres we don't like so much. It's therapeutic, let's say.
It is. And
Yeah.
I don't usually on my channel talk about things that I dislike. I like to recommend things. So
Yeah.
if there's something I don't like, I'll usually just not review it or I'll put it like a Goodreads review, but I won't talk about it on my channel because I'm like, I'm not recommending this to people. Like
Yeah.
I would
I
rather
wish I
talk
had
about
that
it.
attitude. That's a
Yeah.
nice
I want
attitude.
to be like, here's a book that I think you should read if you like this, instead of being like, well, I didn't like it. So but then again, it's like there are other people who would potentially like
Yeah.
that book. It doesn't mean the book is bad. It just means I didn't like
Yeah.
it
Well,
personally.
I
Yeah.
would
So
argue that I'd say a difference in your two channels that I think actually like you serve two different areas that I'd say,
yeah.
Cameron, you're quite good for bringing, especially like independent, like again, like books that I've just never heard of. So if it's a
Mhm,
book I've never heard of, quite frankly, if you're like, here's a book I've never heard of that I thought was just okay, I don't really
mhm.
care.
Yeah.
But say Katie, I think you do a lot of like the bestsellers and Big Buzzy. Like I want to know, yeah, like if I hadn't
That's a
already
good,
read
yeah, that's
Grady
a good
Hendrix,
Yeah.
comparison.
like if
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, like exactly like the big buzzy Grady Hendrix book, is it worth the hype? Is it worth buying the like what is the
Mhm,
hardcover edition? And so that's where I feel more motivated if I'm going to give a negative review. It's the fact that if people are trying to decide, they're telling me like I've pre-ordered this book. If you have a review
Mhm.
copy, can you check it out early so I know
mhm.
whether or not to, you know,
Yeah.
keep going with that. So that's I think the difference. Like I said, because if it's like, yeah, like if I talked about the Ghost Radio book and said, and it's terrible, you'd be like, you
Why
wasted
I
my
hated Ghost
time. Like,
Area,
Yeah.
no one click.
yeah, exactly. Like, how helpful is that? But like
Or it's
again,
like
if
the
like,
third book of the U series, and I was
yeah,
like, because I was getting comments, oh, because I loved the first one so much, and then the third was such a letdown. Maybe the show will be better. We'll see. The
Well,
third
if you're
season
talking
just came
about
out.
night film, that's one that's really buzzy. Everybody like
Mhm.
knows about it, and now I know to lower my expectations because I could potentially not like it. I could still
No, I
like
think no, I
Yeah.
think it in general, I love like 95% of
Yeah.
it. It was just the ending. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think actually Katie and I, even though if we maybe interpreted the ending differently, we both I think felt like I love the journey through the book, and yeah, the ending maybe let me down. Some people don't mind it and like actually don't.
Mhm.
So I would still, yeah, I think I gave it 4 stars. Like it wasn't,
Yeah, there's a scene where
yeah,
he's running. I don't know how to
yeah.
describe it, but and he gets trapped, but it's one of the
I
most
know
like
what you mean.
anxiety inducing scenes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that we read that book what I think we both when it first came out, that was probably 7 years ago plus.
Oh
So the
wow.
fact that we can
Yeah.
still remember that, a scene like that. So
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, if you're interested, I wouldn't shy you away from reading it, I think. And that's
Yeah.
again why I think reviews are helpful is that I'm not always
Mhm.
saying like, "Oh, this book sucks, never read it." I'm more trying to like when I talk about a book on my channel, I attempt to, whether or not I'm
Mhm.
articulate, attempt to kind of position and say, "Okay, I think this is best for these type of readers. If you
Yes.
hate XYZ
Yeah.
or, those kind of things." And I think you both do that really well when you're describing books is that's why I go to your channels for reviews and recommendations. Is like even
Right.
there's I think there's been times that like Katie, like you've said something and being like, you've described something you didn't like about the book or vice versa, and like kind of knowing where my tastes line up with you, I'm able to figure out if
Hmm.
I should check it out,
Yeah.
regardless of, you having to give it 5 stars or, 2 stars. I'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, this doesn't bug me, but it bugs you, so etc. Yeah.
And I've learned a lot about that since releasing my book because it is a short story collection. And of course, there's going to be stories in there that everyone loves, and then also ones that certain people don't like because all short story collections are a mixed bag. Like you're not going to find one that with every story that you love. And it's funny to see the reviews of like the first story in the book is very it goes both ways. So some people are like, "It's my favorite in the whole book," and then the next person's like, it sucked. Don't read it. Skip it."
Yeah.
And I'm always
Yeah.
like, "But all these people said it was their favorite." So that's why I
Yeah.
always try to be like what you said, Rachel. Like, if you like these things, you will probably like this book because I don't want to be like, "Oh, it just sucked,"
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
just me. That's just my opinion. But there are certain I like to highlight like certain aspects of the books and be like, if you like these things, then you might like it. If you don't like these things, then you're probably like me.
Especially because I think to your point, horror is also so personal. Not, I mean,
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
genres, but I think horror, especially
Mhm.
for what gives us anxiety, what scares us. Like I
Mhm.
watched Midnight Mass recently for anybody who's watched it, and I loved it. But then I have a few family members and friends who despised it, and it's because
Mhm.
it's so personal. It's how you feel about religion, you know. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
so it's just yeah.
Yeah.
I think horror
Loved it.
especially. Yeah, it was so
It
good.
was so good.
Traumatizing, but good.
Oh my god, it is so good.
Still need to watch it, of course.
Oh my
And Rachel,
gosh.
you'd like it similar to Haunting of Hill House. I don't know if you've
Okay.
seen it, but
Yeah.
it's got like the little like things in the background similar to
Yes.
Hereditary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
I do kind of
heart-wrenching.
think. I do like, yeah, there's like emotional horror, I think,
Ooh,
really connects, I think, with all three of us.
ooh.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Sounds good. I guess any final thoughts? Otherwise, we can wrap it up here. I promise to only steal you guys for an hour. I say it on camera just because I said it before we got started, but huge thank you to Cameron and Katie for carving out time to come to my channel and do this. I was looking for some kind of way to sort of celebrate the Halloween season, a little bit different. I do very few live streams on my channel, and I don't see you two doing a lot. So I feel
Mhm.
pretty lucky for you again, both to like carve out time and deal with like microphones and connecting up and all that. So you two guys taking the time. This is just really fun for me. This is, just like exactly kind of getting to talk horror with some kind of my online friends, and
Mhm.
so I just I want to say thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks for
for
setting it
having
up because
us.
I've never done one before. Maybe we should
Well,
do it every Halloween.
that would be fun. I was gonna say,
That
people
would be
let us
fun.
know, drop comments if that's something that that'd be worthwhile because you have to line up schedules and all that. So,
Yeah.
um,
I
yeah, but
love
it was
doing
fun.
these. These are so much fun. I
Oh,
used to get so anxious about them, but now it's like, no, I'm just talking to people who like the same things that I like.
yeah, I know. I always get nervous too, and I was like, okay, it's like I guess it's just talking friends and
Yep.
all that. Yeah. Sounds good. Well, I guess we'll wish everyone an early happy Halloween.
Happy
And
Halloween.
if anyone's watching this after the fact, of course, I mean you'll know it because I'm going to save it afterwards, so people can watch the replay. But yeah, feel free to drop any comments down below. I'd love to hear if there's other collabs you'd love us to do on our channels, or if you'd like us to do this yearly. Like I said, it takes a little bit of time in everyone's schedules. So if we know people actually care or find this kind of stuff fun, it's more motivating that way. But yeah, otherwise, thanks again, Cameron and Katie. I think we'll let everyone go here. Thanks
Thank
everyone for
you.
coming out.
Bye. I love that we
Bye.
can say happy Halloween now.
Yeah,
Happy
Happy
Halloween.
happy
Halloween.
Halloween.
Bye.